Hey everybody, Barb Nangle here, fragmented to whole for the shit show, and it doesn't look like anybody's joining me today. And that's unfortunate because today we're talking about loneliness, and I am a little lonely here. But in any case, I feel like I can still impart some wisdom for you. So, I was reading some information about loneliness the other day, and what I read was that in the general population, approximately one third internationally is lonely. And we know that that's even higher for people in recovery and probably even higher for people who are adult children. So this is a huge problem. The thing is, that we can actually do something about it. So, as the Serenity Prayer says, we want the courage to change the things we can, and this is actually something that we can change. So, I first want to identify and help you know that I know about loneliness. So, back in actually about just over 20 years ago, I dated this guy. His name was Jerry. We actually got hooked up to get laid, not to have a relationship. And we fell in love, like you read about, which I now know means we were two halves of a codependent whole. And very quickly, we started talking about staying together for the rest of our lives. And then out of the blue, he fucking dumped me. And I was absolutely devastated. Until that point in my life, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then a few months later, he came back. He told me that having been a committed bachelor for so long, he really needed to do some soul searching. And then not long after, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And then he fucking dumped me again, and I was devastated. However, I know it's hard to compare devastations. I felt like the first time was worse because I had hope the first time that maybe he would come back. The second time, I had no hope because I said, don't you fucking ever do this again. And if you do, don't come back. But after that, I was so lonely that I decided to get a cat. Now, I've always said to people, I like other people's pets. I love animals, I love pets, but there's so much responsibility. But I decided to get a cat because I needed a being around me on a regular basis. And for me, I'm a very touchy person. I love to touch and be touched. And so having an affectionate animal was really important to me. Now, I was also working full time. This was way back in the world when everybody worked in person and stuff. So I was going to work every day. It's not that I didn't have social connections. And I also volunteered at the time, but I felt disconnected from people. And then there was another time a few years in the future from that. I remember where I was living. So actually, it was the next place I lived. So that first place I lived in for 3 years, the next place I lived in for 5 years. And at some point during that time, I was going to church. And there was a guy in my church. His name was Bruce. He was actually an AA guy. I learned so much recovery wisdom from him, but most of the time I was baffled by the shit he was saying. Like, it's none of your business what people think of you, and life on life's terms. I didn't know what any of that shit meant. But in any case, Bruce wore a button at church every Sunday that said, I need hugs. And what was really cool about Bruce is that he gave away the thing that he needed. So he needed hugs, so he gave hugs. And also, he was savvy enough to get people's permission. He got consent from people before hugging them. And I eventually ended up being in a spiritual sharing circle with Bruce. We met, like there was like 8 of us, and we met every 3 weeks for a number of years. And I remember telling him one night, a few years into knowing him, that there were times when I went to church on Sunday just to get hugged by him. And there were times when I went to the spiritual sharing circle just so I could hold hands with people at the end. So I know what it is like to have a deep loneliness and to have a deep yearning for connection to other people and barely know how to handle it. Now, one of the things that I learned early in recovery, in ACA specifically, was that isolation is a form of self-abandonment. And I'm actually looking at my TV over there, and I made a little tent card like this big, and I wrote in dark magic marker, isolation is a form of self-abandonment. And I put it in front of the TV so there was no missing it. Because what I would often do, especially on Friday nights, I would come home and I would watch stand-up comedy. I would smoke cigarettes, which I was lying about. I would drink booze, smoke weed, and just completely isolate myself. And it felt like that was what I needed to do to decompress from the world. Because even though I was out in the world, I was like emotionally and socially isolated from other people because I didn't let anybody in. I was faking the funk all the time, saying yes to shit I didn't really want to do. I didn't know that I was completely other focused and really invested in what other people thought of me. That was not inside my consciousness until I got into recovery. So I get it. So I made some notes. There are health consequences for loneliness. So humans are wired for connection. We do not become fully human without interacting with others and without reflection back from other people. We are not meant to live alone in a cabin in the top of the mountains. I heard somebody my first year of recovery say this. She said, I'm addictive and compulsive in isolation. I heal in community. Well, she's not the only one. This is why, one of the many reasons why I think 12-step recovery works so well, because we do it in groups with other people. We get to connect with other people and be like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who thinks these fucked up thoughts. I'm not the only one who does this ridiculous fucked up behavior. I'm not the only one who keeps abandoning myself. And another reason it affects our health is that when we feel lonely, it can trigger our abandonment wounds. Because remember, I said before that isolation is a form of self-abandonment, which is what adult children do all the time. And so when we feel that, we can spiral, and then we're even more likely to isolate. I need a sip of water. Oh, by the way, check out my mug, parental advisory. I say fuck a lot. I'm going to have brand photos taken with that. So, what I also found out is like, why is there so much more loneliness nowadays? So one has to do with the urbanization of society. This is in all around the world. When people move into cities, they are usually not interacting with their neighbors in a way when you lived like in a village. And actually, one of the things that Todd Hargrave from Marketing with Hippies said when I was in a meeting that I just absolutely loved and had never thought about. He said, the problem with interacting online is that we tend to only interact with people with whom we agree and or with whom we have something in common. And that's good and it makes sense, except for that we're not ever interacting with people that we don't agree with. So when we lived in villages, you could disagree with your neighbor all you wanted, but when their barn burned down, you went over and helped them build their barn back up. It didn't matter how much you disagreed. You helped people and you received help from people. And so now that we're living in isolated apartments and often not living with extended family, or at least in neighborhoods with extended family the way we used to, that increases isolation. And then, of course, there's the rise of technology and the fact that we're so used to being like immediately gratified. Like I want like a minute is too long in the microwave. It's taking 30 seconds for me to connect online. So why would we want to get up and go out into the world when I can sign on to a Zoom meeting and connect with people right there? So we've become very lazy and it's really hard to connect. So what I want to talk about is the solution to laziness, and you are your own solution. So I want to give you some baby steps to get started. I've got a worksheet that has a 1-week exercise. So we want to consciously connect with people in our physical environment. So let me first share the screen so you can take a look at the worksheet if you haven't already looked at it. So this is how to make social connections. And the reason this is important is because that studies show that people who are generally happy, among other things, they make time to connect with other people. And notice that I said they make time. So they don't find time, they make time. So what I want you to do is to make a commitment for just 7 days only to connect with another human. So this could be somebody on the bus. I actually just went for a walk across the street to the beach, and there was a guy standing in front of a beautiful yellow Camaro, and it was gorgeous. And I was like, "Is that your car?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Okay, for the longest time, the Camaro was my favorite car. Now it's a Dodge Challenger." And he was like, "Yeah, that's a nice car." And I said, "Do you love this car as much as I want you to love it?" And he was like, "Yeah, I do." Like, that is a social connection with another human. I would recommend something a little bit more deep than that, but make note of who you connected with. So if you know who they are, put their name. But if it's like guy with the yellow Camaro, then guy with the yellow Camaro. How did I feel? I felt pretty joyous because I fucking love looking at that car, and the fact that it made him as happy as I feel like it would make me to own a beautiful bright yellow Camaro. That's not really my color, but if somebody gave me a bright yellow Camaro, I would. So it made me feel happy. It gave me a spark of connection and a spark of joy. So do that for 7 days a week. And then one time this week, choose someone that you haven't, perhaps that you haven't connected with for a while, in person, and spend an hour with that person. So write down, like, decide who it's going to be. And then when do you want to connect with them, and where and when you're going to connect. And when you come back, underneath there, I would write out, like, how did that make you feel? Because the only way that your loneliness is going to end is if you do something. There's not going to be a troop of people that are going to come knocking on your door and be like, "Hey, do you want to come out and play?" That's not really how that happens. And then the other thing is that I included some episodes of my podcast, which aren't exclusively about loneliness, but I think they will help. One is episode 54. It's about improving your relationships. It's really about all kinds of relationships with humans. The other one is episode 87, how to attract emotionally available people. Like, maybe one of the reasons that you're so isolated is that you've always had these emotionally unavailable people around you. And so learning how to attract emotionally available people can really be helpful. And then episode 132 is, here's how to overcome disappointment so you can have peace. A lot of times we are disappointed in the people around us, and so we isolate ourselves from them. And so I think these 3 episodes will help you with that. So I have just a couple more things that I want to say. Oh wait, no, I already said them. Yeah, studies show that happy people have consistent social connections. And in this day and age, when everybody's on Zoom, it's so easy to just rapidly connect with people on Zoom. But I encourage you to actually leave your home and go connect with another human, even if it's at the corner coffee shop and it's just striking up a conversation with the barista about their bracelet or something like that. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, barb@higherpowerscc.com. I almost never log into the shit show, so if you message me there, I'm probably not going to see it. Oh, and one last thing. I just recently came up with something that is really cool and I'm super fucking proud of. It's called a boundary building starter kit. It's entirely free. It has 9 videos, 2 worksheets, an article, and then it has a link to my podcast playlist of episodes just about boundaries. And it's an evergreen playlist, meaning every time I add an episode about boundaries, it will be added to that. So right now there are over 35 episodes on that playlist. So you can go to boundariesstarterkit.com and get it for free. Anyway, thank you so much. I go to the shit show meetings usually on Sunday afternoon, so hopefully I will see you there. Bye now.